Michael Chugg, welcome to Noise11.com, and we have something pretty exciting just being released, a brand new Max Merritt album, which would be the first Max Merritt album in decades, if my research is correct. Max, he's been working on this one alone for years, hasn't he?
Yeah, they put some. He done some tracks in Melbourne back in 2002, which Jim Barton they worked on them, a couple of months ago, and Jim reproduced them and brought them up to the 21st century. And he also recorded some tracks with Colin Hay in 218, which are on the album. And then he finished the rest of them off last year. I was lucky enough to be passing through LA in 218, and I had Thanksgiving with him and some of his crazy mates. And he played me some of the songs, and I'm so pleased that we've actually got it together. And Ambition through Sony are releasing it today, or yesterday. So I know I'm pleased that we've been able to get it out there. I mean, he was. I don't know whether you've seen the video yet, but it's of I Can Dream, and it's quite touching, and there's a lot. It covers all the great moments of Max's career, and his grandson, his eldest grandson's at the end of the video, and Max hands over the guitar to the young fella, and they walk out of the theatre. It's very, very touching, very special.
So when was the video made then?
He made the video about 2 months ago. About 2 months ago. I first saw it about 6 weeks ago. And we made a few suggestions about including a few more of the historic photos and shots of Stewie Spears, all sorts. It's a real history thing now. And you can see in the video, he fought the good fight. I mean, he picked up this disease back in 2002. So, he was on dialysis for a long, long time. But he never lost his sense of humour. And they used to love him. He was still going down to the Pommy pub in the Valley in LA 2 months ago.
Which is the way we all want to treat our final days. Obviously, this album is now released and comes very soon after we lost Max just a month or so ago. So was this album always intended to be released now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we obviously, once it started to get to the finished product, we were hoping that Max would be still around. But it was always going to come out. And obviously we've everybody who's involved in it, Wally Bishop, who's been his longtime manager, and Jim Barton, the producer, and Robert Rigby from Ambition. I mean, everybody's worked really, really hard to get it finished and get it out.
So tell me about you and Max. How far back do you go? When did you two meet?
Well, there was a couple of big shows came to the Launch Snout Hall when I was 14 and a half, 15. First one was Billy Thorpe and Screaming Lord Sutch. And Thorpe nailed me that night. And then about 3 weeks later, there was another show, and it had a whole cavalcade of stars of the time on it. Digger Revell, Little Paddy, the Les Bridge Trio were the band who played in the opening half, backing all the acts. Then I was sitting there, and the second half started, and this 4-piece band walked on stage. And the guy had the most amazing voice, because I was a big fan of soul music, the Joe Texas and the Otis Reddings and the Sam Cookes and all that music of around that early 60s period. And Max Merritt and the Meteors walked on stage, and they blew my head off. It was was right up there with Thorpe, and so consequently, as when I moved to Melbourne and everything, those two guys became very close. And I loved Max. He was just a wonderful person. And, I did a lot of work with him when I first got into working for Consolidated Rock in Melbourne. And I was doing shows with him and just hanging out. And because everybody was living in Melbourne then. I mean, in those days back in Melbourne, there were Sebastians and Birdies and the Thumping Tum and the Catcher and all those incredible gigs. And every Friday and Saturday night, everybody would end up at the Greek Club in Lonsdale Street. All the bands down from Sydney, like Max and the Lardy Dars and all those sort of bands, and Thorpe and the Chain and all the Melbourne bands. And everybody would party at the Greek Club till 5 o'clock in the morning. So it was such a scene in Melbourne in those days. And, it was an honour to be part of it. I mean, I used to, whenever Max was on at Birdies or Sebastian's, I would turn up every night and just stand there with my mouth open because it was something else. And he was so loved. I mean, Thorpe just turned into Thorpe, but Max had turned up as Max. I mean, when Max turned up in Sydney with the original Meteors, Thorpe was still in the pop thing. And in 1 week, Thorpe stole Max's band and they became the second Aztecs. And he stole Max's girlfriend, Jackie Hahn, the model, at the same week. So that was all pretty tense for a while. And, as years went on, even, 10, 15 years ago, it'd be funny, we'd all be in town in Sydney or wherever, and him and they'd be drinking, and eventually him and Thorpe would get into a fucking argument about the old days. But they were great friends. But, yeah, everybody still laughs about that. Like fucking Thorpe. But no, look, I used to hang out with Max. When the band moved to London, Stewie and Max, Bob Birtles, whenever I was in London, I'd go and hang out and I'd see them play at Dingwalls and all those, the Marquee, all those famous London places. And they were doing very well in Europe. And then, of course, he released that great album with Slipping Away on it. And I was lucky enough to run the tour. The Australian tour. So we've had a lot of great times together, and he's just still one of the great voices. I was, when we did Long Way to the Top, which, took Thorpe 6 months to convince me that people would want to come to the shows. And we built an amazing lineup. And I mean, Max just, every night, he just ripped it apart. And, was so pleasing. And, when he came back a couple of years later for the ARIA Hall of Fame, I mean, he got straight off the plane and went straight to the hotel into dialysis. And that's pretty much been his life ever since, having to be on dialysis all the time. And he got to come back a few more times and do a few more gigs, but in the end, it just got too hard for him. But he never ever lost that voice, and he certainly never ever lost. I mean, he had an incredible ability to make people laugh and enjoy themselves. And for me, I mean, he's right up there. He's right up there in the top 5 artists for me of all time. So to be able to get this album out, and I think it's a great album. I think the songs he's written with Colin A and some of his mates from Nashville that are on it, they're just great tracks. And it really is a great tribute to him.
Max Merritt was playing a very unique style of music, wasn't he, in the late 60s? We had, I guess, with Billy Thorpe and a whole stack of the great Australian acts at the time, it was very much a pub rock culture, but along comes Max Merritt and he's playing soul music. Try a Little Tenderness, Western Union Man were American hits, and he took them and made them his own.
great story about the Western Union man. They were in Perth doing some shows, and he went into, I think it was 6 p.m. at the time, and he was in the music library going through the boxes of all the records. And as you know, in those days, the American 45s had the hole in the middle, right? And he's flipping through, and he was playing different records in the library, listening to shit. And he played Western Union Man. And he stole the 45, took it back to Melbourne, and 8 weeks later, it was a Max Merritt hit. Classic, very classic.
Yes, we don't have days like that. And then, you know, like he built his name on covers, but when Slipping Away came along, I mean, that today is still one of the greatest Australian songs of all time, don't you think?
Yeah, it really is. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but on the final episode of The Sound on December 6th, there's a special tribute to the show, but we shouldn't publicise. Gadinsky will kill me probably, but anyway. But yeah, and a lot of great singers are singing that night. So yeah, no, look, it's one of the all-time classics. And it always will be. And people, you know, there's been so many versions of it recorded over the years. And it went very well in England. He was unlucky. It never, you know, he moved to America too late. Instead of going to England when he went to England, he probably should have gone to America, because, you know, he would have blown them away. It was just, it was too late when he got there.
Yeah, the album's all there to stream now. I can dream. It's up there, and
yeah.
Well, Michael, lovely to talk as always, and look forward to seeing you in Melbourne, no doubt, because you can actually come across our border and vice versa. We can go and visit you now too.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Gadinsky to ring and demand I come down.
Before then, have a great Christmas and a great New Year then.
Yeah, and you too, Paul. It's great to talk to you, mate.